Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Coming up on The Payoff, Vic Vela is a host and reporter for CPR News. That's Colorado Public Radio. He is a Colorado native. The guy has won so many awards as a journalist. As a 5-time Edward R. Murrow award-winning journalist. If you know anything about that, that is the creme de la creme of journalism awards. He also is sober, and his story is unbelievable. He was diagnosed HIV positive in 2006 after what feels like a lifetime of cocaine use and ultimate abuse. His rock bottom is something I could totally relate to. He picked up the phone, he called another sober guy, and the guy helped him. He reached out, and somebody was there, and now he's there to reach out to people. This was an important conversation, and this guy really makes it easy. He's a total pro, sports guy, and just a real cool dude. So Vic Vela on the way. But first, Kevin Souza. So your career before you got sober in 2015 was pretty impressive. so it's pretty cool to see the work. It's a testament to how smart you are, and the fact that you have great tenacity. As being a reporter at the Capitol in any state, in Colorado especially, takes a dogged determination. So you have that. Before we get to your story as far as drugs and alcohol, you have that journalistic bug. You went to Arizona State and your Walter Cronkite School of Journalism. How did you start off? At what point in your life early on did you know you wanted to get into journalism?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I knew since I was a little kid that I wanted to be on one of the guys on SportsCenter, right? I would watch the Big East basketball games on ESPN, and John Thompson versus Rolly Massimino.
Oh yeah, now you're speaking my language, buddy.
Jim Boeheim and I grew up a huge fan of professional wrestling, and I grew up in the golden age, like in the 1980s. So I was like 7 years old when Jake the Snake Roberts and the $1 Million Man and Hulk Hogan. It was pretty amazing for this little kid, and I would just hear these announcers go nuts, whenever someone wins a title or it's during a battle royal. And I'm like, I totally want to do that. I just want to be on the air. So I knew when I was a very young age that I wanted to do that. And right out of college, I did. It's funny that you talked about the, being smart and getting a lot done. Like that is our worst enemy though, in addiction, because, us so-called smart people think we can outsmart, we can outwit, we can outmaneuver this thing that has its claws in us. And it's the reason why I put it off for so many years. I should have, asked for help many years ago, but I didn't, because I was just, I don't have a problem. I just interviewed the governor. I don't have a problem. I just interviewed this this running back from the Dallas Cowboys. I don't have a problem. How could I possibly have a problem? My life is great.
And that's the insanity, Vic, because knowing your story a little bit, outside the Capitol, you've got a crack pipe and you've got a bag of crack, right, hidden under a rock. So you can go out and smoke crack and then go talk to the governor. I mean, for me as an addict, it's so relatable. But to some people walking around out there that just have no clue about addiction, it's like, what do you mean you were outsmarting it? You're outside smoking crack, but it's like, no, we got it. we got it under control.
We just marched to it. I mean, the drummer that we march to in addiction is like, most people can't even hear it or see it. Like it's this imaginary thing that we are just, life is fine. It's like that meme with the dog drinking coffee while flames are surrounding him inside the house, and he says, "This is fine." You know, that's exactly what we are in addiction. Like, to me, you know, going in and out of the Capitol to smoke crack and hiding a pipe behind a dumpster in an alley off Colfax Avenue in Denver makes perfect sense. It's just like brushing my teeth, right? And to most people, they're like, "What the hell are you doing, dude?" And that is the madness of addiction. But getting back to your question on career trajectory, I right out of college, I went to I did my undergrad here in Denver, and then I was hired as a sports anchor and reporter for an NBC affiliate in West Texas, and here I am, 22 years old, like living the life. Like I'm covering Friday Night Lights. Like, you know, football is huge.
And those are the go-go days of news, television news, and television sports. Like it's on fire.
It was so much fun. You're a one-man band, right? Mm-hmm. So you're carrying your own camera and covering these, you know, these high school games in Texas was like covering the Rose Bowl. You know,
yeah. I mean, I'm in Central Texas. I get it.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. And my face is on the park bench, right? 10 o'clock news with Vic, join us. And I thought I was pretty hot shit. And that's really when cocaine entered the picture for me when I was,
did you discover it in West Texas?
Yeah, I mean, I had done it before. I had done it, in college, but it was one of those things like where college was, every addict has a period of their life where the drugs and alcohol didn't cause problems, right? They were the fun period. It was the honeymoon period.
Absolutely.
With drugs and alcohol, right? We all have it, and we all spend our entire lives trying to get back to that point.
Yeah.
But we never do. So for me, that was college where, yes, I would go party with friends. I'd go to the bars. I'd take mushrooms at dead shows and fish shows. Yes, I'd do some cocaine on the side, but I'm also getting a 3.5 grade point average.
Where'd you go to undergrad?
So this was the Metropolitan State University of Denver.
In Denver.
Yeah. It's a city college. At the time, it was a city college. So I did some partying there, but I was mostly a good kid. I did my internships at TV stations and radio stations, and I got good connections, and that's really what helped me land my first job right out of college. But cocaine really didn't get a grip on me until I was in Texas. I'd go out to the bars on a Friday, Saturday night, and I was introduced to it or reintroduced to it.
Walk me through that first experience, if you remember it, because when you rediscovered this, this thing that made us immortal for a little bit.
Dude, it's so funny. Like people may expect some big grand story around it, but honestly, it was just a friend saying, "Hey, do you want some of this?" Like, okay. Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. Like I was cocky and willing to do anything. I was drinking at the bar, and I'm also gay. And so I'd go to these gay bars in West Texas, and, I'm this 22-year-old kid on TV, like everyone was buying me drinks, right? So that's enforcing your ego. And one time a guy's like, "Hey, do you want to go into the bathroom and do some coke?" And he was a good looking guy. I said, "Okay, sure, let's do it." And wow, it just like, whoa, I need this all the time now.
What was it like with your sexuality in a place like West Texas? You go from Denver, right, which is a melting pot of sorts, and then West Texas. You mentioned it: Friday Night Lights, cowboy boots, pickup trucks. It's not so. It's not your stereotypical destination for someone who's gay.
Well, especially more than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. We're not talking about 2023. We're talking 2000 when I was there. I here's the thing with this, dude. Texas, I'm telling you, Texas is so polarizing, right? But Texas, I swear to God, is the nicest place I've ever been.
Yeah.
Like everyone is so goddamn nice there.
Yes.
And in West Texas, everyone's, "Hey, we love you on TV," like this, and with the little drawl, and it's so touching, and it's moving, and it's warm, and everyone genuinely is warm. I also had let's face it, I am not like an effeminate gay person who, and a lot of people who are gay grew up would get their ass kicked in school because they had a lisp or something, right?
Yeah.
And God, it just kills me that people had to grow up like that. But I never had. I'm just the person who who I was raised. I talk the way I talk since I was a kid. I just happened to be gay, right? No one, there are certain people you would have to, the other person would have to tell you that they're gay.
For heterosexual people, like when you have friends that, you know, I had a buddy, Rich Smith, who, I mean, carbon copy of you, sports junkie, you know, just a great all around dude. But you wouldn't say, okay, this guy's gay. You know, and when he told us, it was like, it was cool, but it was like, oh wow, that's a surprise, because you have this idea, especially like you said, 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
About what you're expecting. And that kind of breaks a little bit of the stigma too for people, which I think is important, right? It's like, oh, okay, like that's not, it's regular, you know, it's totally normal.
Yeah. And you know, and I was out, you know, I didn't hide, you know, I didn't wear glasses and a mustache when I went into gay bars. I was just myself, right? Like and my sports director knew, and other reporters at the station knew, and it was never a problem. And God bless the people of West Texas, because I was never treated badly there.
And you start to do, again, like you rediscover the cocaine. How does it ramp up?
Yeah. You know, man, it's just one of those things where, you know, it was so much fun on Friday night. Then you roll out of bed and, oh, that was a blast. Let's do it again, right? You just want to do it again. It's like when you're a kid at an amusement park. You just got off the roller coaster. That was amazing. Let's get back on it.
I compare it to, I'm sure you can relate to this. The first time I started to do cocaine, this is like 2000. I think we're around the same age. I was like a couple years out of college, and it was the first time I got like my own bag, you know? And I woke up the next morning. I was like, I have to do this again. It reminded me of the day that I got Tecmo Bowl on, like, let's say I got Tecmo Bowl on a Tuesday, and Wednesday I faked sick so I could stay home and play Tecmo Bowl all day when my mom went to work. It was that same affinity, that same rush, that same, you know, that same level of, I guess, serotonin or the endorphins. It hit the same spot, man. And
I've never heard cocaine compared to Tecmo Bowl. That's amazing.
Yeah, but and I remember as a little kid, I remember thinking that it's like, or I'm sorry, you have somebody in their 20s, like, I have this, I got to do this. I have this right here. Why would I not do it? So that's the idea that we have to continue to do this. And why wouldn't we do it? It was awesome. It made us better. You know, that starts to happen for you. When do you notice, because your story, much like mine, is you become somebody who now is doing this drug around the clock. When did you lose, lose your grip?
Let me back up a little bit too, and kind of talk about. So I got hooked in Texas, but the very first time I did cocaine was in Denver, and I was hooking up with this guy, and he's like, "Do you want to try cocaine?" I'm like, "I've never done it before, but I'm drunk. Let's do it." And I did it, and it's like you feel like Hercules. It's literally like, you know, this lightning bolt hits you. And, you know, like on Masters of the Universe where He-Man puts his sword, right?
By the power of Grayskull, let's go.
And you're just like, whoa, man, where is this? Where's this been all my life? So getting back to Texas, I do it again. I'm like, oh, I remember this. This was fun. It literally, I mean, there's really no explanation for it. I did it on a Friday. I loved it. I woke up the next day. I wanted to do it on a Saturday. And then it's still the weekend. Hell, let's do it on Sunday. Let's day drink and watch football and do cocaine on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And that was fun. And if I left it there, I don't know if we'd be having this conversation.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you can get away with doing cocaine safely a couple nights of the week, my God.
Knock yourself out.
Yeah. But that wasn't the case, because Sunday turned into Monday, calling in sick on Monday.
Yeah.
And then Monday became Tuesday. And pretty soon it just became like brushing my teeth. Like I would before, you know, after the 6 o'clock news during the week, I would go grab dinner and have a few drinks along with dinner, more of a liquid dinner, and come back to the state newsroom, put together my newscast for the 10 o'clock news. And just before I went on the air, I'd go into the makeup room, put on my tie and put on my makeup, and I'd do cocaine off the sink. Yeah. Right before I did the sports cast. And I did that every night I was on the air. And I went out there, hey folks, you know, we got the sports here, and, you know, Paladuro beat yada, yada, yada. And, you know, interacting with the anchors, and no one knew. No
And
one
that's
knew.
almost as dangerous as the drug, the ability to navigate those waters.
Oh man, like I think Pete, you may relate to this. I think part of the allure of the drug is getting away with it.
Mm-hmm. Sure. There's
You
a
know,
sexiness to it.
there absolutely is. There's always been this part of
Or at
me.
least that's what I told myself, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Since I was a little kid, I loved getting away with shit.
Mhm.
Like I was the kid who, if the teacher said, "Don't touch that button," I'm the first person to touch that button. And it's like, you didn't tell me why. I'd like to know why I can't touch this button. And that's exactly how it became when I was an adult. Like I had to have it. And I like the idea of kind of being high around people who had no clue. Oh, Vic is so energetic. He's so charming. He's so, magnetic, right? But there was so much, and some of that is true to my personality, but it was fueled by drugs and alcohol. And I loved it, man. I loved interacting with people. Let's go get drunk at 10 o'clock in the morning. And people are like, why are you doing that?
How much was
fun.
alcohol to like a part of your story?
Alcohol, here's the thing with alcohol is that I loved alcohol. I loved tequila. I loved gin. My favorite drink was gin and tonic. And then I graduated to really good gin on the rocks and with the lime. I was a frequent of bars and I was a regular at certain bars. So I would have my cheers bars that I would frequent and be at quite a bit. So the frequency of my drinking was a lot, I guess, compared to regular people, but the actual enjoyment of drinking really wasn't my bag. I only drank to use it as a vehicle to get to the place I really wanted to go.
Yeah. I tell people, I'm an alcoholic first, but I shouldn't say that. I'm a speed freak as well. It was kind of hand in hand. And it was like French fries and ketchup. I heard Jason Bateman describe it like that once, like alcohol and cocaine for me, French fries and ketchup. If I have alcohol, where's the cocaine? Yeah. And a lot of times when I had cocaine, I was like, where's the alcohol? I need to even this out. I overshot the mark. We are the worst. We're the worst chemists in the world.
That's exactly right. Like that's, boy, and we love to experiment. And it doesn't matter how many times things blow up in our face, we will get right back on, put on that lab jacket and, throw on the goggles and let's get this right this time. And sometimes the night before it was too heavy on the booze and you had a hangover. Let's fix that. And if I'm too high, let's come up with some landing gear. So here's where the Xanax comes in, right? Or the painkillers come in. My favorite combination, Pete, as my addiction worsened, was cocaine and morphine, and that was obviously a deadly combination for a lot of people. I overdosed on that a few times. I honestly don't know how I'm still talking to you now because I spent so many times trying to get that combination right. And sometimes I didn't.
When did you really start to kind of lose like the wheels come off as you continue to, your career's taking off, your addiction is as well. Any consequences?
Oh my gosh, yeah, there's a lot, and I won't walk you through everyone, but one of the big ones I'll certainly talk about because it's important to talk about these things. Like, if you do the checklist for an addict, like, okay. Is drugs and alcohol interfering with job? Check, because I lost a lot of jobs because of my drug and alcohol addiction. Does it interfere with your finances? Check, because I would pay for drugs before I paid the rent, before I paid other bills. Is it impacting your relationships? Check. God, yes, because people are leaving me because they're tired of my bullshit. Is it impacting your health? And this is really where things, what could have been a rock bottom for a lot of people, and it was a big deal for me.
2006.
Yeah. I was sick all the time, and it was the middle of summer. I'm the only person in town who's sick in the middle of summer, and the doctors ran all these tests and they couldn't figure it out. And then one day, a doctor who knew my history with drugs and needles and sex and being gay, he kind of just put it together, which was the obvious, the Occam's razor. It's like, when's the last time you were tested for HIV? And as soon as he asked the question, I knew that's exactly what was going on. I can't tell you, Pete, how many partners I've had, but I've had a lot. I can't tell you how many needles I've put in my arm, but it was a lot. How many times I shared those needles. it's impossible to tell how I got it. But the fact is that in September 2006, I had it and it had progressed. They use a couple things to measure HIV. One is the viral load, which just tells you how much the virus is in your body. And then two, your T cell count or CD4 count, which is our immune system. The viral load was through the roof. So the virus had been doing damage for a long time now. And my T cell count was what doctors would describe as borderline AIDS. If you get below like a 200 threshold of CD4 count, you're in trouble, and you need to start antiretroviral therapy right away. And that's exactly what happened with me. I was very sick, and thank God that at that same time they had just put out the first 1 pill a day medication for HIV. A tripla, which was a combination of 4 HIV medications all in one.
And that was the pill that would make you, and the side effects, right? Like the dreams are out of control.
Oh my gosh.
I've heard about that. Yeah.
Oh, the lucid dreams, man. I'm telling you, and I am not overstating this. It was like being on LSD. Like I would go to bed and I would have this dream, and coyotes are talking to me like on The Simpsons. It's like this bizarre shit. It's really heavy. And you wake up, whoa, that was just my medication. I guess we'll be doing this again tomorrow night.
Where was the fear at with all this stuff? All this is going, I mean, and again, you and I growing up at the same time, you get AIDS, you die. Yeah. I mean, that's, or you get HIV, you get AIDS, and then you die. That's what the thinking was.
When I was growing up, when I was a kid in the 1980s, I talked about watching wrestling in the 80s. And I also remember vividly during national newscasts, Tom Brokaw and Dan Rather, AIDS is in the news again. And they would show pictures of people in their hospital beds, and they just look so awful. And that scared the hell out of me when I was a kid. And then when I first came out of the closet when I was a teenager, you know, one of my first boyfriends turned out to be HIV positive when I was at a pretty young age. So that really threw the terror in me, because this was long before the advancements that even were available in 2006. And so thank God I started that drug. Shortly after taking that drug, I started, the HIV became undetectable, and it's been undetectable ever since. I've had it for however many years, it's 17 years now.
And so it's funny because when I got sober, I went to a rehab in Pennsylvania, and one of the guys who ended up being one of my best friends is this guy, Steven, and he was HIV positive, and he was a crystal meth shooter, also a gay guy. And that was my first introduction to, okay, here's someone with AIDS, and the guy looked strong as an ox. I mean, it was just like, oh, okay, like Magic Johnson aside, right?
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of exposure to, guys that had AIDS and were doing okay. And there was a drug he took and he was fine. And then the further I got into recovery, I met a lot more. I mean, really did. And it's amazing how drugs, right, can really impact that. It's not all sex. You know what I mean? I met a bunch of straight guys too who had it, right? Yeah. Through IV. And so all that stuff's interesting. One sidebar too we talked about the 80s and the media. My favorite HBO original movie ever is the band played on.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, and that really kind of opened my eyes. I was a kid and I was like, oh, okay. There was and we needed that type of stuff where it's like, you really put a face on it, put some feelings to it. It's a great movie.
I absolutely concur. I also would throw Philadelphia in there with Tom Hanks, because when it's Tom Hanks, right? Like, it's like when he's portraying a gay man with AIDS, people pay attention. Yeah. And I remember being a teenager in the theater watching that and crying. Like, it was just, it just hit me. And to think that years later, not long after that, I would be involved in a scene where the risk for contracting HIV was much greater than any other segment of society.
Yeah.
And then to come out of it and still be alive. Pete, I take my medication every day, not just because I need to stay alive, right? I need it and I want to, right? Because you want to stay alive. I also do it because in honor of the people who never had this medication.
Yeah.
In the fucking 80s and 90s, when I had a fake ID in college, right? When I was 18 years old, I had a fake ID. So I've been going to bars since I was 18 in the 90s. And I'd go to these gay bars, and some of these were like catered to older gay queens, and I loved them, like these piano bars and these old queens telling jokes, drinking martinis. I miss those days. And they, these guys really took care of me. I was like this 18-year-old gay guy new to the scene, and these guys have lived a life. And I remember going to those bars, having a great time with them. And then a few months later, I'm back and I'm like, oh, where's so-and-so? And they say, well, he died of AIDS. And that was my first experience of like people actually dying, like people in my life who I looked up to, who I laughed with, who I shared drinks with, who I shared a smile and a hug with. I come back to the same bar a few months later and they're fucking dead. And now
they didn't have the opportunity.
Now I can stay alive for obviously for myself and for them.
Yeah, that's something, somebody without HIV it never thinks about. And I appreciate you sharing that, because it definitely, it's something, it opens my eyes, right? I just said that a little bit ago, but it opens, that's what I love about talking to people like you. Not only am I learning about addiction, but I'm learning about everything. And go back to addiction,
mm-hmm.
You get this diagnosis in 2006 and you continue to use drugs. You continue to drink. I mean, you don't get sober for 9 years later. Did you feel like it kind of took off because there was fear there for you?
Fear is the under the ground, right, of every addict. Like that's our groundwork is fear. Like everything, all of our pillars are just like planted in fear. And for me, that you really had to go back to before I even picked up a drink, like the issues I had being gay as a small town boy in the 80s. Parents had financial difficulties. My dad drank a lot. He was an alcoholic. So I had all these issues. I was in love with my best friend in high school. I couldn't tell anyone about that. And it was torture. So all these things, so then when I go and I'm an adult and I'm actually entering adult relationships, I had fear around those. I would either bail early or I would be scared to death that person would leave me after seeing all my drama. It's funny, when I tested positive in 2006, Pete, my addiction, for a lot of people, that might be a wake-up call. For me, it was just an excuse to continue getting high. What does it fucking matter now? I have HIV and, life is over, so to speak. And I'm just going to keep getting high. And also consequences don't matter. How many people have we talked to who ran over and killed someone?
Yeah.
In a car because of their addiction. And then they go to jail. And the first thing that they do when they get out of jail is get high.
Yeah.
Like it just, a judge can say, if you don't get sober right now, I'm throwing you into prison for a year.
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
It doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
Like
it's funny.
We don't have the same chemistry as other people.
I know you go to meetings and I do too, and doing the 12-step deal. And you will get to a meeting where a guy tells that story, the judge told me, and here I am. And maybe he stays sober. There's like 10 other guys in the same year period that come in, have the same story, and they go right back out.
Oh, and they never get to the meeting in the first place.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's tragic. And that's why Pete, and I think you'll agree why people like you and I tell our stories, because there is someone out there. I remember, man, in the year before I got sober, I would stay up all night. I would have multiple sex partners. I'd be doing drugs all night. And then every so often I'd just be surfing the web at like 4 a.m, and God knows what that looks like. But I would stumble across, I'm a big fish fan. So I'd be pulling up fish videos.
You're a big deadhead and a big fish fan.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And as I was, pulling up the YouTube stuff on fish, the algorithm points me to Trey Anastasio speaking at a drug court conference. Trey was a heavy drug user and an addict, and he's been sober for many years. And he told the story of the night that an officer pulled him over and he went to jail. And that's the night that his life changed. And he talked about how he thanked the officer. He was grateful that he went to jail. He was grateful that this cop pulled him over. And I'm sitting there thinking, why are you grateful about this? Fuck that. But I held on to that.
The seed is being planted and we don't even know it.
Planted. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so even if people aren't ready for the message and they're not willing to change, we can still plant the seed by talking. It's not about promotion. It's about, example. And if people can see my example and it just plants a seed, boy, then it's totally worth it.
And they are. I mean, judging from the response to your podcast and the work you do now, Back from Broken is the podcast, and we'll talk about that. I want to get a look back to your life before you got sober, because the journey is about, the sunlight of the Spirit coming through you now like it does today, and all the help that you are able to give people. But before that, before you get sober, I mean, you mentioned it. You are, what do they call it? PNP?
Party and play. Yeah.
Party and play. So you're basically now just drugs and sex are going hand in hand. So it's all the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was just how cocaine, man, made me do things that I could not imagine doing sober.
Yeah.
Like I'm sitting here, I could tell you stories about the things I would do and that just would blow your mind. And I would sit back now and think, thank God I'm not that person anymore. Mm-hmm. It also helps me recover because it allows me to have compassion for myself, that I live this, instead of beating, because we could beat ourselves up pretty easily over the shit that we used to do. But now I try and have compassion for myself.
Expound on that a little bit.
Well, because the person who was doing that was very sick. I was very sick when I'd go and I'd sit in the back of some gay movie theater, and there's porn in the front and everyone is giving each other blowjobs. And I'm sitting in the back sharing needles with this guy shooting up. Another guy next to us is passed out from doing too much heroin. And I'm just looking around at this debauchery that I'm in. And, talk about Sodom and Gomorrah. Like it was just fucking, I'm like, what are you doing? But that I was so sick that was the only way I knew how to live. Like as soon as that cocaine got in me, I became a squirrel and I would take it and run to my nest, close all the blinds in my apartment, smoke crack until the wee hours of the morning. And I'd be sketchy as shit. Sometimes the only time I would emerge really would be to go hook up with a guy or to get more drugs or go outside and smoke a cigarette. That was it. The other time I'm not only would I close all the blinds in my basement apartment, I would also shut off my phone and hide my phone underneath the bed. So that way no one knew what was going on. The paranoia that goes hand in hand.
Oh, the peeking out the window. It's just, that's the stuff. You're right. And I think about that. And sometimes, look, I try to think I work a pretty good program, but the shame comes back. And that's why I have to talk to guys like you. That's why I have to practice it. That's why I have to, I have to talk to other guys, sponsor other guys, talk to my sponsor, or whatever it is you need to do to stay sober. There are so many ways to do it. I'm not here to tell you it's the only game in town the way I do it or the way you do it, but there's the recovery out there if you're seeking. And being a seeker in sobriety is, again, something, it's another superpower, right? I want to ask you a little bit about when you got sober. It reminds me a lot of where a lot of us are. It's one of those, you're smoking crack, you're listening to sad music, you lost your job, you lost your boyfriend. I mean, that's it. And you call this dude who took you to a meeting, I guess, a couple years before, or because a lot of us, myself included, right? You just fucking stumble around life. And so sometimes you stumble into a meeting because you have to, or because you hit that low point where somebody drags you, or however you end up there. But you mentioned it with Trey. You have a little bit of experience or a little taste of what this is. And you have this guy's phone number and you call the guy.
Yeah. It's a pretty amazing story, and it just goes to show, I'm a firm believer in my higher power, and it just goes to show how when when I was actually ready to do something about this, my higher power was like, let's fucking go, let's do it. I had made previous attempts, and I should say half measures or half-ass attempts to get sober, before, maybe, okay, I'm ready, let's do it. Go to a couple meetings, you're sober for a week, and then you're not sober anymore. This happens. I went to a rehab center, a really fancy rehab center, and I wasn't ready to get help. The day I checked out, I got high. So to your point, even though I wasn't ready at those times, I still had those sayings, these, in my case, Cocaine Anonymous sayings in my head. And I still had the shares from people at those meetings in my head. And one of the people who I befriended was a guy who was also a recovering crack cocaine addict. He was very successful. And he gave me his number, and we did a little work for maybe a week. And then I disappeared and we never talked. This was years ago. Okay. So fast forward to the night you're talking about. God knows what time it is, 3 a.m, 4 a.m. I just smoked my last crack rock. I'm totally out of drugs because they always run out.
Yeah.
That's the problem with drugs.
That's the problem. They're always going to run. No matter who you are, you're going to run out at some point.
Dude, and then I didn't have any more money, right? I was broke, and I'm just sitting there petting my dog. My poor dog just saw me through all this hell, and I'm listening to sad songs on my headphones, and I'm scrolling through my phone, and there was a guy who I had met before who gave me his number. And mind you, it was like 3 a.m. He could have been asleep. His phone could have been off. He could have deleted my number, right? Any number of things could have happened. Instead, I called. I have nothing left to lose. And he answers the fucking phone. And the first words out of his mouth, "Hey, Vic, how's it going?" And I just lost it. I mean, are you kidding me? Not only does this guy answer the phone, he says, "Hey, Vic, how are you doing?" And I just lost it. And it still chokes me up to this day. And the very first thing I said was, "Hey, man, can you take me to a meeting tomorrow?" And that was the last time I got high. That was 8.5 years ago. And I did the work. It's hard. It's fucking hard. But I was more willing to do the work than I was to go back. I did the George Costanza thing. And it's so funny because I don't mean to make light of this, but it's true. Like, you got fired and you keep going? Yeah. Well, there was a Seinfeld episode where everything is going wrong in George's life.
It does. Yeah. Okay.
George,
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And then Jerry brings up the idea, well, why, if everything you do is wrong, then why don't you start doing the opposite? Because if everything you think of is wrong, then the opposite has to be right. And so George does that, and all of a sudden he starts dating this pretty girl. He gets a great job. Like, his whole life is amazing from doing the opposite. And so when I went to that first meeting and the meetings that ensued, the old Vic would have been like, well, I'll just, maybe I'll call my sponsor today, but maybe I'll give him a call tomorrow. No, I did the opposite. I called him at that time, or I shared in the meeting when my sponsor told me to share. I prayed when he told me to pray, even though you're talking to a kid, I would equate prayer with religion. Right? Like in the 1980s, in some televangelist, Jimmy Swaggart, telling us we're going to fucking hell because we're gay. I remember that. I'm like, you want me to pray to this God that that has treated me like this? Are you crazy? He's like, do it. And he basically essentially said, fake it till you make it. And man, once I did that, I couldn't get behind that step of like, giving everything to God, but I could get around, came to believe I was okay with. Maybe I'll be open-minded. Again, I'm George doing the opposite. Instead of putting up a wall, I came to believe that a higher power could restore me to sanity. And so pretty soon, Pete, I'm in my shower. I'm before I get up out of bed, I say the Serenity Prayer. And then I'm saying, well, God, it's been a rough day and things are going on with my job and I'm struggling to stay sober, right? I do those little prayers. Months later, I'm having full on conversations with my higher power in the shower.
Yeah.
And it was all because I faked it, right? It was all because I faked it at the beginning. And now pretty soon it turns on into a full on counseling session that I could not imagine not doing.
Now, let me ask you, again, all we have is our experience, but I got to ask you this question. It is based on your experience, but maybe a little opinion. What happened this time that made you fake it? What was different? What about your experience? Because let's face it, man, I spent 10 years. It took me 10 years to get 1 year of sobriety. And I was on the debate squad about Tom, Dick, and Harry and who anything else that could keep me from being sober. And then one day I had the gift of desperation. And I was willing to go to any lengths. And I listened to people. I went to a halfway house. I was like, shit, I used to work in the NBA. Now I'm at a halfway house. Well, you got to work at Kentucky Fried Chicken too. I was like, fuck, okay. And I did it. And it was unbelievable. But what got me to that point, right? The gift of desperation. What happened to you where you're finally willing to go to any lengths?
Oh man, what a great question and such an important question because, a lot of people talk about hitting bottom and some people really do have a story around hitting bottom where, I lost my house and I lost my kids and now I'm totally homeless. Like those are true bottoms. For me, it just didn't like my bottom. I never could see the bottom. Like, okay, I thought maybe HIV AIDS was the bottom. No, I kept going. Right? Smoking crack behind a dumpster outside the Capitol in a suit and tie. No, I kept going, right? Man, it was this simple. And it's the old, the beautiful thing about recovery meetings and recovery groups is that they have these wonderful cliches, right? We all know one day at a time. Another one, fake it till you make it. Another one was being sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that was it for me. I asked myself, Pete, when I was sitting on the floor before I called that guy who took me to the meeting, I asked myself, are you really going to do this again tomorrow? Are you really going to do this again tomorrow? Like hustle just to make a few bucks to pay for a small crack rock? Like every morning I was waking up in damage control from what I did the night before. I'd wake up and, oh my God, I just spent all my rent money on cocaine and alcohol. Okay. Who am I going to call to borrow $300 from who I haven't already hit up? Right. Who am I? And then you're getting your stories confused around why you're borrowing the money. Like you call your sister and you say, well, this happened. And she said, I thought you said this happened.
That ingenuity, right? And that ability to be industrious we talked about at the very beginning of the podcast starts to deteriorate.
Yes.
And for very good reason.
We are great hustlers, man. We hustle. We fucking hustle. But at some point it just runs out. The well runs dry. And you can't remember which lies you told which people. And that is a lot to carry around.
What was your family like when you stopped? I mean, did they believe it or were they, sometimes that takes a minute.
Yeah. Well, they had to see evidence. They were always rooting for me. They always were there. And I'm not sure if they really knew this time how bad it was. Like there were times where I was clearly in trouble in the past. Like one time my mom had to come deal with me after I had gotten into a big fight at a bar and I was all bloodied, right? Like they had seen, and of course the HIV diagnosis and losing jobs, like there was evidence. But this one, they didn't really see a lot of that because I didn't really see them a lot. They were hoping, they were hopeful, and they were supportive. And my God, were they supportive, and their love and support helped me.
How did you start to change your life in sobriety? What are some of the things that you did that you noticed? Oh God, like this is working. I got the same feeling now that cocaine would give me, because to me, that's the key. That's when, and it happened to me relatively early on in sobriety because I just given myself over to whatever people started to tell me, and I started to feel good. dude, if this wasn't fun, if I didn't feel good, I would be still getting high. I would still be getting drunk.
Oh, thank you. You have to replace the high. You can't just like, man, we live this life of like incredible highs and lows. And now you take these drugs away from us, and what, you expect us to sit in a library all day or what? Like that's what you're thinking, at least, right? But it turns out that I can, now that I don't have these heavy, foggy mornings to deal with, I can actually get up at 6 a.m. and go to Red Rocks. I could wake up at 6 a.m. and go hike with my dog, whose tail is wagging the entire time because he's so fucking happy. Like, I can go play basketball and you know, and rebound and block someone out and set up, you know, and play racquetball. And I could go see fish or the dead with other people who are in recovery, and we can support each other. And not once do I have to think about what the tens of thousands of people are doing around me. I'm like, can I enjoy this music still sober? Yes, affirmatively. And I'll add you one. The music became better sober. I was able to pay attention. Like when I would hear Coltrane, you know, do a solo, and I'd be in the car driving and I hear him do something in that solo for that song that I'd heard a million times before, but I'd never heard that little part before because I wasn't paying attention. Oh my gosh, how amazing that was.
It's the fucking fourth dimension. I mean, that's it, you know?
Yeah.
And you're out there and you're operating at just kind of a different speed, a different level. How does your career start to move forward and sobriety? Because that's interesting, right? Because for me, in order for my career to get back on track, and I'll let you go, I got a couple more minutes here with you. For me, in order for my career to get back on track, I had to make amends to people. I mean, you know, I did it the way my sponsor told me to, but everybody knew I was fucked up, is what I'm saying. So in order for me to ever move forward in life, and of course, career is a part of that, I had to come clean in you know, to the people I needed to come clean to. And ultimately, it took time, but everybody came back around because guess what? I was sober and I was doing the deal. How did that happen for you?
So I have one amazing example of that regarding an ex-partner of mine, and I'll get to that. I want to get back to the one thing about, I mentioned Coltrane.
Yeah.
And one of the things that held me back for so long as a creative person, it's like, can I still be creative sober?
Yeah.
I'd spent so many nights writing term papers fueled on cocaine. I would write down notes when I was on LSD. Like I thought drugs really fueled this element in me to be creative. Can I still be creative? John Coltrane was a heroin addict. He got sober. The very first album he made in sobriety was A Love Supreme. It was his fucking masterpiece. And he did it sober. And is the only, and so when I think about that, it really makes me proud that all of the best work I've done in my career has happened after I got sober. And it's really just a testament to that you don't need this shit.
It's a total mind fuck. That's amazing about the Coltrane reference. I've never heard that, and you can bet I'll be sharing that with people.
Well, please do, because it's true, and there's a lot of people who could talk about that same thing too. I would, so being able to make amends to people it's not easy, right? And the advice that I give people is you are not doing this so that people can forgive you. That's not why you're making amends. So don't go into this expecting that they're going to forgive you and they're going to invite you back into their lives, because that may not happen and you may be setting yourself up for failure. But that's not the point of this exercise anyway. You're doing it because you have to tell people, you have to put into your own words and articulate, I know I hurt you and this is how I did it. And this is why I did it. And this is why I'm sharing this with you right now. It is a powerful part, and it's a crucial part of recovery. It's really hard sitting across from, I'd go to one of my editors. I made an amends to him because he would see me blow up in the newsroom all the time and throw phones across the newsroom and act like an idiot, right?
Yeah.
And it was one of the best things I ever did was make amends to him. I had an ex-boyfriend who he loved me, but I hurt him. Years later, I reached out to him to make an amends. And I'm like, man, I'm so sorry for what I did. I was very sick. I was, this is what happened and this is where I am now. My amends allowed him to open up about his struggles, because it turned out that the guy he dated after me died of a fucking overdose. He got hooked on opioids and he died. And so now he's sharing this story about how hard it's been for him to deal with the aftermath of his partner's overdose. And now, Pete, I'm in this position where I'm helping him. I'm helping him deal with his pain.
And he's coming to you. That's the thing too, is we have a light that attracts people to us when we're doing what we need to do to let the sunlight shine through us, is that we're able to help other people. And it's not like, because it never worked for me. Hey, you need to do this, but you have it. And the people are curious. And when the light's on, they would like it to shine on them too. What's something you would say? Somebody's listening to this and they're like, I can't do it. I can't get a day. Or somebody walks up to you in a CA meeting and says, well, Vic, what do I do? What's one thing, and I'm not trying to pin you down here, but if there's something that you like to share with folks that they're trying to get this that can't, what is it?
Well, do the easy stuff, man. There is a reason why one day at a time is the oldest cliche of all the cliches in recovery, right? One day at a time. Some people may say that as a throwaway thing. I don't. I literally mean that when I tell. How many times you'll hear like a young person and they've got a few days on them, but they're worried about, can they stay sober for long periods? Like, well, I have my brother's wedding coming up in June and I don't know how I'm going to stay sober for that. Dude, time out. That is an eternity away. Don't even think about the wedding in June. What are you doing to stay sober today? That's the only thing. Strip it down for them, because they're really overwhelmed. And because I remember what that was like. Yeah. Oh, I got the Super Bowl party. Can I stay sober? No, dude. Just do what you got to do. Listen to your sponsor, create a community, go have coffee with friends in recovery, read the book, whatever it is that you do everything you can just to stay sober today. That's all you need to do.
How about, go ahead. You finish your thought.
No, I was just going to say, and so when people are like, wow, that's amazing. You have 8.5 years. Well, I have 8.5 years of one day at a time. That's why I have 8 years of sobriety, is because every single day I said to myself, okay, I have this crisis in front of me. I'm not feeling good today. Life is turning to shit. I'm having a really bad day. What do I need to do to stay sober today? Because eventually, Pete, you get to a point where you have faith in yourself and faith in your recovery that tomorrow is not going to be as bad. So just let's get to tomorrow. Just get to tomorrow. And then you have a fighting chance. And
by the way, if you guys listening are as into this as I am, you can hear more of Vic and the podcast and Colorado Public Radio it's Back from Broken. Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, it's something I'm very proud of. It's a show now that it's in its 4th season. 4 years ago, I went to my news director and said, I want to do a podcast about recovery. And God love everyone at Colorado Public Radio for supporting me in that effort. And basically, we're not reinventing the wheel. It's me as a person in recovery sitting across from another person in recovery, sharing our stories. And recovery is a big umbrella. So it can be about drug addiction. It could be about alcoholism. It could also be about mental health issues and loss and grief. So, it's just how people deal with the biggest challenges in their lives.
You talked to my man, Aaron Taylor, recently.
Yep. Aaron Taylor, Notre Dame legend.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
College Football Hall of Fame. We've talked to Jim Belushi. We've talked to Hunter Biden. We've talked to a lot of people who have shared. And I got to tell you, one of my favorites, Pete, was Jake the Snake Roberts.
Oh, yes.
Because I was a kid. I know exactly what the room looked like, what my bedroom looked like on a Saturday morning when I'm watching Jake the Snake Roberts wrestle, or Saturday night's main event, and I'm playing with his little figurine in my pajamas. And now, you're kidding me, all these decades later, I'm talking to him about something we have in common.
It's amazing. You're talking to him about sobriety.
Yeah, it's absolutely fucking amazing.
Yeah. Vic, dude.
Sobriety will blow your mind. It will absolutely blow your mind. Just give yourself a chance.
I'll tell you one quick story. I was covering Summer League, and I had to ask Chris Mullen questions for work, and they put the camera away, and then I'm just like, hey, I was a year and a half sober at the time. I'm a year and a half sober. We're in Vegas, right? I'm like, I know you're sober. And right away, he starts to smile when we talk about sobriety. He didn't want to do the interview. We talk about sobriety. And then he's like, there's a good meeting over at Harrah's. There's a good meeting over here, at the Cosmopolitan. And he's like, just keep, I told him he could tell I was a 12-step guy. He's like, just keep doing what you're doing. And I remember thinking like, holy shit, I'm talking to Chris Mullen. And the guy just got the biggest smile, right? Because he wants to talk to me because I'm sober.
Amazing. It's amazing, man. It's such a gift.
Vic, I could talk to you forever, dude. I really appreciate it, man. And thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, man.
Hey, thank you so much for thinking of me and having me on. And all the best to you, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.